Hello, Put Me in Coaching family. Welcome to tonight's call, August 17th. We are halfway through August, which means halfway through the 8th month of the year. I, for one, feel like 2025 is going by super fast, which is good and bad, right? It means the tough times kind of go by quickly, but then you're in August and looking at what your goals were for the year. And it's a really great time to do a reassessment. We talked about that last month, being halfway through the year. Hey, where are we? What do we need to do? And the good news is there's still time to reach your goals for the year. So we're going to talk about the principles of behavior and how we really focus on making those changes, because when we make those behavior changes, that's when we're really able to start having the lasting changes over time, which is what we're looking for. And so tonight we're going to talk about the 5 principles of behavior and what that looks like as far as when we talk about changing our own behavior. Okay. So there's 5 principles that we need to be aware of. So grab a pen and paper. These are going to make things make a lot more sense to you. Okay. Because when we talk about behavior change, it's really important to understand that we can apply these principles to every area of our life. Where when we're trying to create new business habits, new health habits, whatever you're trying to create, you can count on these principles to stay the same. Okay, so that's the good news. Okay, and the even better news is if we can really start to learn these, then we know that over time we can truly change our behavior. So we're no longer in that back and forth where the yo-yo dieting, if you will, or the back and forth between healthy and unhealthy. You can just start to make lasting changes. Okay. And it's easy if maybe you go astray a little bit and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? It's so much easier to get back on track when we understand these principles. Okay. So as we go through our reminders, right? What we eat, what we think, what we do. And all of these things can be applied. The 5 principles of behavior can be applied to the what we eat, what we think, and what we do, because those things themselves are behaviors other than what we think, because you can't really observe and measure the what you think. And that's the definition of a behavior, is something that can be observed and measured. However, you can look at that yourself and kind of measure how you're feeling and that kind of stuff, right? So I, as an outsider looking in, I can't measure that on you, but you can measure it on yourself. Okay. And so as we're talking about the what you eat, what you think, and what you do, we have this 7-step signature system that we apply to those 3 pillars. And that signature system, the 5th step, is behavior modification. And until we start to truly modify that behavior, we can't achieve that lasting change that we're looking to achieve. Okay. And so we all know what the formula is. If you're new here, the formula: 20 to 30 grams of protein every single time you eat, 5+ grams of fiber, 5 to 8 grams of fat, 10 to 15 grams of carbs or less per meal, right? That's the formula. And when we apply these principles of behavior change to our what we eat, what we think, and what we do, we start to consistently apply that formula, and it becomes easier and easier, right? Because it's not always easy, but it is simple. Okay. So what are the 5 principles of behavior? So the first one is behavior is a product of the environment, which is incredible, because what does that mean? That means if you change the environment around you or modify, right? Just manipulate the environment around you, you can create some behavior change. Okay. Think of that in terms of you're walking through your house and every single time you walk by a chair, you stub your toe on it. You're probably going to move that chair after you've done it a couple of times, right? You're going to move that chair so you don't do that again. Okay. Same thing goes for behavior change when it comes to nutrition and fitness and all of that. You need to set yourself up in an environment for success. You cannot surround yourself with lots of sugar, which, by the way, is kind of happening right now at my house. And that's okay because it was planned, right? It's Granddad's birthday weekend. So we're celebrating him. Happy birthday, Granddad, if you're listening. I know sometimes he listens in. So, but these are the things that I plan for. So therefore, they become part of the plan, right? It is not getting off track per se because we built it into the system. Okay. The next principle of behavior: past behaviors are the best predictors of future behavior. And we talk about this one a lot. Okay. We talk about this one so much because I think this one allows us to look at our past patterns. And then it allows us to identify, hey, what environmental changes can I make, right? Get the stuff out of my house. Don't drive by Chick-fil-A on the way to work, right? Pack your stuff the night before, put it right next to your keys so you don't forget it. And, sometimes you might still forget it, okay? And that's okay, but you need to have those alternatives in place. But past behaviors are the best predictors of future behaviors. So the more something has happened in the past and the more recent it's happened in the past, the more likely it is to occur in the future unless we make a conscious decision to change it. And so we have to identify, are we staying up too late? Are we binging too much TV? Are we eating too many things off plan? Are we not getting food logs filled out? What is it that we're either doing or not doing that is not serving us, right? And then we identify that and we say, hey, I've done this a little bit too much in the past, so I need to develop a plan to circumvent this. Past behaviors are the best predictors of future behavior. The next one says, behavior is strengthened or weakened by its consequence. And consequences, by the way, can be either positive or negative. So what comes immediately after a behavior will either strengthen or weaken it. That's why step 6 of the 7-step signature system is so powerful. Celebrate and track all wins. And that's why I talk about going back and highlighting everything that went right for your day, because behavior that receives attention is behavior that's repeated. And that's what that means. Behavior is strengthened or weakened by its consequence. So behavior that receives attention is behavior that's repeated. And I really want you to understand that one, because that is how we get so far off track so quickly sometimes, because we beat ourselves up with the decisions that we make and the choices that we've made that are off track or not serving us. And when we beat ourselves up and criticize ourselves about it, what is that doing? That's giving a lot of attention to that negative behavior. Behavior that receives attention is behavior that's repeated. And so we're just going to do it again, right? We continue to dwell on it. Even if it's negative attention, it's still attention. So what we draw attention to is what's going to continue to occur. And so that's why I really recommend go back through and focus on what went right. Celebrate yourself for what went right that day. Okay. Like today, I got up, I drank water first thing this morning, listened to my YouTube videos like I did. That went really well today. I'm going to celebrate that. I'm going to write that and count that as a win, because I need that to occur again and again and again, because that is building good, healthy habits. So that's like anything. If you're wanting to develop a habit with personal development, you have to give yourself attention and celebrate when you do it. Same thing with eating on plan. And that attention could simply be highlighting in your book, hey, I did this. And maybe even having your win tracker on your phone. Hey, ate on plan today. Text your accountability partner, text your coach. Hey, stayed on plan 100% of the time today. Great job. behavior that receives attention is behavior that's repeated. But if you're constantly saying, well, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to identify what didn't go right, because you do need to identify what you need to change and what you need to tweak. But that's simply all you're doing. You're identifying it and then you're moving on. You're coming up with a plan and saying, hey, this was my plan to prevent this from happening again. And I stuck to it today. So I'm going to celebrate that. Okay. So behavior is strengthened or weakened by its consequence. The next one says, in the long run, behaviors respond better to positive consequences. And think of this in terms of, let's say you're at work. Okay. So at work, a consequence for doing a bad job could be that you continue to get written up and written up and written up, right? Those write-ups are meant to motivate you to not do the thing that you are doing. Whereas if they were going to focus, and this hits on two of these principles, but if your manager, supervisor, whatever, focused on what you were doing right and celebrated you for that, and said, excellent job, I'm so proud of you, thank you for getting this done, you're doing an awesome job, rather than looking for what's going wrong. That's a very reactive approach. If you take a proactive approach, right, and you build in those positive consequences, celebrating your wins, tracking your wins, right, but also setting up contingencies. If I do this, then I get this. Okay, I did that for myself back when I was studying for my board certification exam for behavior analysis, right? I had to study a lot for that. And I was not somebody that in school I had to study a whole lot. And so that was really hard for me understanding, but I had to pass that test, right? My rent depended on it. Okay. And it was, that was just the reality. I was in a place in my life where it was like, okay, I have got to start making more money. I've given up this other paying job, took a pay cut so that I could study, right, and do what I needed to do and get the experience I needed to get to be able to sit for this exam that would put me in a much better position. And so it was really important that I passed on that first try, right? And that was not an exam that a lot of people pass on the first try because it's difficult. And so I took this program that guaranteed pass rate on your first try or your money back. It was like, all right, I'm all in. I'm doing this and I'm going to do it exactly how they say to do it. And it was hard, right? For 3 months straight, I studied 3 to 4 hours a night during the week. And I was still working full time. So 3 to 4 hours a night. And then on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, I studied 12 hours a day. The only time I saw my friends was my Friday night dinner. Okay, I would go out to dinner with friends, but I put a contingency in place. If I didn't study and get far enough ahead on those other days of the week, then I didn't get to go to see my friends. And I was highly motivated to do that because that was the only time outside of work that I wasn't studying. Okay, and that's extreme. That's an extreme example. But if you think about that, set in place some contingencies for yourself. Okay, I have to eat on plan X amount of time. If I do that, then I get this. Okay, whether that's a new outfit, whether that's a trip. My parents used that when my dad lost weight, right? He took a trip to Europe and did the motorcycle trip through the Alps in Europe. That was a great contingency, right? First, you've got to do this, then you get to do this. Okay. So think of contingencies that will work for you, right? So let's say you eat on plan 90% of the time during the week, like you're supposed to. Well, then you get to enjoy a night out. But otherwise, you've still got it. You can still go out, but you've got to eat on plan, right? And so that's where you have those contingencies in place. Okay. So in the long run, behaviors respond better to positive consequences. So instead of beating yourself up about it, right, we're going to implement positive consequences, a trip, a new outfit, whatever, right? And of course, you're not going to go on a trip every time you meet a weekly goal, right? So it needs to match the effort level, right? But let's say you hit your goal weight. Going on a trip is incredibly powerful. Okay. But maybe like a weekly goal, the contingency could be again going out to dinner with friends and getting to enjoy some of the stuff you want to enjoy. But if you don't even want to use food as a reward, you could say, okay, if I whatever do this X amount of time during the week, then I'm going to put $20 away towards a new outfit. And at the end of the month, you'll have $100, right? And then you can buy a new outfit. So whatever that looks like for you. Okay. Making sure you're putting those positive contingencies in place that are going to be motivating enough, right? And I hate to use this example, but I'm going to because it's the one I use all the time. You can't reward yourself with chocolate cake if you've never tasted chocolate cake, right? So if it's not something that's going to motivate you to work for it, don't use that as a reward, okay? If you don't like chocolate cake or if you've never tasted it, right? So make sure whatever contingency you put in place is something that you are willing and able to work for, okay? And it makes sense. All right. It could just be you get a sticker on a chart, right? I did a Mount Everest challenge on the Stairmaster one time. And so I printed out a picture of Mount Everest and I had broken it down to however many boxes I needed to get. And the boxes were worth X amount of steps. And so each time I did that many steps, and my goal was to summit Mount Everest in a month, right? So I had to do 100 flights a day, I think is what because I needed to do 2,900 flights because that was going to be 29,000 feet, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I broke it up and I had printed out a picture of Mount Everest and I drew lines on it. And then every time I would finish whatever, I would put a star there. And so when I finished, I had an entire thing of stars. I found that the other day. That's what made me think of that. And so you've got that, right? You've got people have used marbles, right? Every time you lose a pound or whatever, you take a marble and you move it over to a jar, right? You could do that with change or whatever, right? So these are visuals. And again, that's positive consequences. You can see it, okay? And you're celebrating your wins, all right? And then the last principle of behavior is whether what we did works takes time to tell. And I think this is why people get off track. Patience is a virtue. We know that. However, we also know that patience is hard to come by, especially in a world where we have instant gratification in almost everything we do. And that is what has set us up for quote unquote failure. Okay. This is what we have to overcome. We have to recognize it. Okay. Past behaviors predict future behaviors. We can see that, hey, we are so used to instant gratification that sometimes it's hard to understand that behavior change is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Especially if in the past, maybe we've tried something and we've lost a ton of weight really quickly, but it wasn't a sustainable program. And so then it led to that yo-yo. Okay. This is a lifestyle change. You are changing the way you think about food. You're changing the way you approach what you eat, what you think, and what you do. So whether what you did works takes time to tell. You're not going to eat one healthy meal and all of a sudden you're at your goal weight. No, it's small efforts applied over time that lead to success, right? That's that life of discipline. And we've talked a lot about discipline. So discipline, you apply those small little things over time, and eventually you start seeing the compound effect. But the opposite is also true. If you live a life of blame and irresponsibility, then it's going to compound and you're going to go way, way off track. That's why we talk about opting in, getting the education, holding yourself accountable. tracking, behavior modification, tracking your wins, and giving back. When a mission becomes bigger than just yourself, it is so much easier to maintain over time. So think about why you got started and why you wanted to get healthy in the first place. Because that's what you're going to have to, over time, it's going to develop, and it's going to become a bigger picture than you, right? The relationships that you've developed, the way you feel, the way you show up for yourself allows you to show up for others in a way that you weren't able to before. And so when it becomes bigger than you, that's when you start to see that true behavior change take over, because you have a responsibility to someone other than just yourself. And that may just be one or two other people. It could just be your family, right? It could be clients that you work with. It could be whatever. Okay. But when you start to identify the bigger picture, that's when you're able to let go of that instant gratification that we crave so much. Because when it becomes bigger than just you, it becomes easier to say no thank you to the instant gratification. All right. And we talked about how to create habits and all of that last week. But we said we had to make it easy, and we had to make the habit we wanted to break, we had to make it difficult and undesirable, right? And that's where instant gratification shows up, and it's scary because it satisfies us temporarily, but not in the long run. And that's what we have to train ourselves to understand, is instant gratification is fleeting. And once we can truly understand and recognize that concept, and recognize what is it that we're doing that gives us instant gratification versus what's going to give us gratification in the long run, that's when you start to really truly achieve that behavior change and you become a different person. It becomes easier to say no thank you. Or it becomes easier to just work something into your plan, not beat yourself up about it, and get right back on track the next day. But until we can let go of the instant gratification and replace that with discipline, that's where we get into that battle, that constant battle with ourselves. So we start by saying no to one thing and we celebrate it. Remember, behavior that receives attention is behavior that's repeated. So we say no to one thing and we celebrate it. And then that snowballs. And then before you know it, we're only saying yes to the things that serve us and help move us forward. This is the mindset we have to get in, and it takes practice. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're not going to be perfect from day one, and you don't have to be. You just have to get a little bit better. And when we can continuously apply these principles of behavior over time, we start to see true change. And when we can understand instant gratification is fleeting, it's just that, it's instant. It's here today and gone today. But if we can build in that delay of reinforcement and accept the delay of reinforcement, and the delay of reinforcement is the goal that you're working toward. It's the compounded healthy meals and exercises over time, that life of discipline that lead to that compound effect. And then one day you wake up and you say, oh my gosh, I've made it. I've gotten where I want to go. And then you set new goals and you adjust and you figure out, do I just need to do more of what I'm doing? Or do I need to change some things to get where I need to go? All right. So that is our 5 principles of behavior. Okay. I will see you back here next week. This week, I want you to really take some time to think about what are the behaviors that you need to change. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks now. What are the behaviors that you need to change, and how are you going to apply these principles of behavior to change that behavior? Okay. What is it that you are chasing instant gratification with, and what are you using to get instant gratification versus what is that accepting the delay going to get you? And I want you to write it down and make it clear, because what if you have your goal in your face every day, like I have my goals written on a whiteboard right behind me. Okay. That's going to allow me to get where I need to be. All right. So I will see you back here next Sunday, 7 p.m. And in the meantime, I will see you on text message or in the comments here. Drop a comment if you want to share with everyone what you are working on creating that behavior change. So I'm super proud of each and every one of you for showing up. And I will see you back here next Sunday, 7 p.m. Have a great week, everyone.